Happy Thursday, everyone, and welcome back to our NoCodeOps Live Community Show. If this is your first time here, we are NoCodeOps, a free community for operations professionals who leverage the power of no-code and automation to become the best operators at their company. I would love to hear who's watching us right now. I would love to see give us a hello in the chat. I always like to see our community members here for our events, and we do get together every Thursday, inviting influential speakers from the no-code and automation space to come and teach the community and show them what they've been up to. And speaking of amazing experts and amazing projects, I'm here again with Matt Wensing, founder at Summit, and you might have seen him already because we had an event with Matt, but we had some cookies involved and not the tasty ones. So welcome, Matt. Welcome back.
Thank you, Claudia. Yeah, well said. Well said. I said there will not be any cookies at this event. I'm sorry.
No, I even thought of going to the, heading to the supermarket and getting some cookies just to try and be funny, but I didn't.
All good. Great to be back. Silver lining is we get to do this again.
Absolutely. And, even with the cookies, we had such a great time with you. And I'm a huge fan of Summit and the product that you've been working on. And in general, when I read the description of your event, it was really interesting to see, some of the usual, topics like, is AI going to replace no code, which is one of the questions that often come up in our conversations, in our Discord, but also it's great to see kind of your solutions on how to optimize workflows using Summit, using no-code automations. And just for the sake of people that might not have watched that painful video last time you were here, would you like to tell us a little bit about you and how you got into the no-code space and what is it that makes you happy these days?
Absolutely. So Matt Wensing, founder of Summit. Summit is a no-code platform. Our goal is to help no-coders have the best and easiest way to work with data and AI, and really drilling into what that means right at the cutting edge. My background started out as a software developer in 2004. Built my first websites in the late 90s, actually, but then went to college. And I call myself a no-coder for 20 plus years because my first job out of college, I was working with spreadsheets and data and thinking to myself, my goodness, this is not fun. So I kind of call it the blue collar knowledge worker. Like you get to wear a suit and tie maybe and or dress up at work, but then you sit down and you're just like shoveling data all day.
Yeah.
And that frustrated me. So my first no code project was 2004. I built a product, or I built a little app, a little JavaScript app in the browser for my team to use at work that automated some of our Excel work, and felt the payoff, loved it. It was really satisfying to not just speed up my own work, but to also build something that my coworkers could use. And started a company, built it. It was bought in 2019, and then I started this new thing. And I kind of went back to my roots and said, how can I make it easier for people to do these data jobs that computers are just better at? And now getting to enjoy the AI era. So, yes,
How can we make it fun? I love that.
absolutely. So that's a quick background.
Awesome. And people that are watching right now, we're currently streaming onto YouTube, LinkedIn, X. I think that's it. If you are watching, I always say that I would like for our events to be as interactive as possible. So please use the chat. I can see Jonathan, Jason. So great to see you here, guys. Drop any questions that you might have in the chat, and we'll make sure we get to them during the presentation. And speaking of presentation, should I pull your screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go.
Awesome.
Ta-da.
So I already talked about this. In case you can't find us on the web, usesummit.com. What I want to walk through today is really getting into the nitty gritty as I've used and try to use AI, LLMs, and working with data, both as a developer building a no-code platform, and then also as a no-coder using my own platform and others. Just some of the ways that I see where there are opportunities to make it just less friction, easier to work with. And what I like to say is getting more value out of every call, because you're going to call these GPTs, these LLMs. How do you make sure that you get as much value as possible from each of those? so that your work is streamlined and we can stay in that world of automation. Because I think one thing that's really tricky is a lot of the automation and the tools that exist today are really built on the assumption that you call these things and you're always going to get back some structured data, right? That is, you were talking with me before we started this about APIs and how do they work. I mean, the fundamental concept is it's a contract between a thing and another thing, and they both agree that, hey, every time I use you, you're going to give me back this data, and it's just going to count on it, right? And AI kind of breaks that contract. And what we're focused on here, and what I want to show today, is how do we sort of restabilize that relationship, if you will, so that you can build automations that you can be confident are going to be reliable, right? So, yeah.
People that know I'm a foodie, they keep on using the restaurant analogy when they try and teach me APIs.
Mm,
So I nailed that. Got the restaurant, got the waiter is the API, blah blah. Bring in the order. Uh,
yeah.
got that. So what would AI be in that scenario?
Yeah. AI is the
The
person
crazy
who
customer that doesn't pay the bill.
I would say AI is the person that's in the kitchen that says, you know what? I know she ordered tomato soup, but she's going to like it a lot more if we add just a little bit of croutons or, bread,
Oh, the
whatever
master
inside. And
chef.
you go, I have a gluten allergy. I don't want that. Right. And it's trying its best to make it better. But it's kind of also breaking that contract you had where you said, I know what I want, can you please make this? And there's a lot of power in having a chef that can basically cook anything, I think, would be the
Mhm.
other way of saying it. But you also need to kind of tame that chef and say, cook anything, but please observe these rules, because otherwise I can't eat it, right?
I'm gonna
And
die. Yeah.
I think that's the challenge with no code today, because it means that what it does is it puts a lot more pressure on the tools that you use to call that API to be able to handle that variability. So yeah, love the metaphor.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
So yeah, let's take a look at some no code flows or some tools, and I'll kind of explain where they fit um,
Mhm.
in people's worlds. So I always do a screen check. I change tabs. You can still see this new tab, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so this is Summit. We look at the world as being about what we call the messy middle. If you read our new website, you'll see the messy middle concept as being, traditionally, there are triggers and there are actions. And maybe at the very end, you say targets or destinations. So something triggers a workflow. And at the very end, there's a place you want to put the data. You want to return the results somewhere, or you want to store it somewhere. Sometimes you want to call a webhook, which is to say, we want to continue the flow um, somewhere else. And so, uh, yeah, LinkedIn event will start soon. I don't know if we're running on LinkedIn yet or not.
Well, LinkedIn people, join the YouTube. YouTube is cool.
There you go. Yeah, maybe hop over to YouTube. Uh, and so we believe that's not going to change. And whether it's a human kicking off the process or a new submission into type form, whatever it is, that workflow is going to always have a trigger, and then it's always going to have a destination. Where we see a lot of the value happening is it's in the middle. It's saying, we need to extract some data, we need to load some data, but it's the transformation of the data in the middle. That's what the T stands for in GPT, transformer. It's the transformation of the data in the middle where I think a lot of the value that blue collar knowledge worker brings is going to get created. And so we're focused on that. So let me give you some examples and explain,
Hmm.
why did I say it that way?
I
Let's
had
say
no
that you,
idea that's what the T stands for. What about GMP?
so it's uh, pre generalized pre-trained transformer. So it's a
I love that.
yes,
Generative pre-training transformer. Yes.
yes. So it's a pre-trained transformer, and the idea is that it's been trained on all this data. It knows how to transform things. And if you want to really geek out, there's a short set of things that GPTs are really good at. Generative, thank you. Like general generative, yes. There's four things I like to think of it as is capable of doing. It can compress things. Let's just talk about text. It can compress text. It can expand text. It can remix text, and it also translate text. And I think of translation as really being transformation. It's saying it's in Spanish. We want to translate it into French. A translation. It also means it's in this shape of data. It's in this JSON shape or this XML shape. We want to shape it into this other shape. And so That's what it does. It's also what we do with our minds all the time as creative people, and so it's incredible. But again, those spontaneous transformations can cause us trouble. So coming into the middle here, I'll show you kind of an example of something that we can call. So I'll load up what's the easiest one here. So let's say that we want to, and I'll come down here actually to the bottom to start. So what we allow you to do is you can build these models, and I like this one as an example. This one takes a screenshot of a website. Okay, so it's sort of a okay, that's kind of neat, and that's kind of a basic beginning we might want to do. And the way we do that is we can just pass in, we say request, we say what the URL is of the website you want to capture, and then people that know enough code to know there's certain ways you can fetch a website. You can post to it, you can get it. We added one called IMG, which is just a way of saying take an image of this website. And this is a really small kind of example of just making it this much easier for you to do what you're trying to do. We know that taking a screenshot of a web page is just a common thing that you want to do. Why not just make it as easy as changing a get to an IMG request, just typing in. So instead of saying GET up here, I know this is pretty small. I change this to IMG. This takes a screenshot of the intercom pricing page. And these days, with generative AI being what it is, the utility of taking a screenshot has gone way up, actually. So in the old days, maybe taking a screenshot of a web page, you'd say, well, okay, I have now a PNG file or a JPEG. What am I supposed to do with it? In the now, in the day and age we're in with AI now and having vision capabilities with GPT, screenshots are a way more valuable asset than they used to be. In fact, all images are, because I can take a screenshot of the intercom pricing page, pass it to AI, and then you can see down here what we've done is we actually asked the AI to just using that screenshot extract information from the page, using its vision capabilities. So screen scraping, I would say, is changing a lot now because of this, and I would expect to see more and more screen scraper tools, such as our friends at Scraping Bee. They have a screenshot tool, but before saying, "Oh, I need the headline of this page, I need the pricing numbers off this page. Let me go into the HTML and try to get it." Being able to just take a screenshot instead, pass it to AI, and then say, "You pull out the data for me," is just a much more compact way to do it, and it means fewer steps for us means less time spent on a canvas building these things and more time working with the data. So this is a simple example of a couple steps inside Summit. And so this first step again takes a screenshot. The next step, I'll expand this. This actually builds the prompt, and I'm going to try to make this bigger. There we go. That's got to be better for screen share.
Great.
So
Yeah.
yes.
Awesome.
So this is a prompt object. So in Summit, there's a couple different kinds of objects. We believe in just having a few basic building blocks. You already saw the request. This is an object type. That's just like a JSON object a lot of people are familiar with. And its basic job is just to hold some data and then pass it along. And in this case, it's holding a prompt. And the prompt says, can you summarize the pricing on this page and return it as a JSON object called pricing? So kind of the first magic trick here is we're actually inserting the screenshot that we took in the previous step right in line here with this prompt that we're creating. And then this is what you call, a rich prompt. So some people refer to, you might hear the term passed around RAG, which is RAG, retrieval augmented generation. It means that you're going to add to the prompt a bunch of data that's going to help the GPT do a better job than if it was just, if you didn't provide that screenshot of that information. So giving that screenshot to it makes it officially retrieval augmented generation. We went and retrieved that screenshot. Obviously now GPT can tell us a lot more about Intercom's pricing than if we had just said, hey, tell me what you know about Intercom's pricing, because two things. One is it's going to have a cutoff date where its information is going to be behind, today. Maybe they just changed it last week. And the other thing is we get to control kind of the context that it has when it's thinking about that. So maybe if you don't feed it this, it's going to go out and look at an article that somebody wrote on complaining about Intercom's pricing or this. So again, we're kind of taming that chef and saying, here's what I want you to look at. Here's the latest available information.
Follow the recipe.
Exactly. Follow this recipe, please. Or, observe these allergies. Don't delight me, but don't surprise me.
I love that. I love that we've learned. It's only been like maybe 5 minutes into the presentation, and we already learned two acronyms, RAG. And I now know what RAG is, past the RAG, which I didn't, and what ChatGPT stands for. Love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, demystifying these things, and then understanding what makes them tick. Excuse me, what makes them tick just makes us much more powerful at what we can get out of them. Again, it's all about, we're going to call this. If we do call it with the screenshot, we get this much value. If we call it with it, we're going to get way more. And I know you've probably heard about prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is a really
Yeah.
fancy way of saying, let's learn the techniques to make this prompt better, because just like with humans and interviews, better questions lead to better answers, right?
Is
So
that an actual career path? Like I've seen lots of people looking for prompt engineers. Do you
hmm
think that's, and I know that we're gonna get into Q&A and
yeah.
questions
No,
about AI, but do you think that's gonna be a hype of the moment, like all these prompt engineers, and then all
I
these
think
people in a few years will just be n
I
yeah.
yeah. I think that it's like a lot of specializations where I think it's going to be a skill that everybody eventually has. Temporarily, it can be consolidated into, it is the skill that someone has that gets them the role, and it's their job title, perhaps. I think over time, just like people got better at searching Google, people need to get better at prompting GPT. And it's just a skill that, again, you're going to call it, the tokens you exchange might be the same amount. So it's going to cost you the same amount, but the value you get can be dramatically different just based on your prompt engineering skills. And again, we would love to put labels on things, but it's really not as scary or engineering as it sounds. It's really just learning how to ask good questions and how to
Mm,
be clear and concise with the language that you use. So one example I'll give is I built another model where I said, do you believe that dot dot dot, and I gave it some question. Hey, do you believe that this company is SOC compliant or something? And it gave me one answer, and it kind of hallucinated, and it said, yeah, I think it is. And I realized, it, and then I said, based on the evidence, is it safe to assume that it is SOC compliant? Well, no, it's not. And so we complain about hallucinations, but in some sense, there's this murkiness in our own language when we ask the question, where it is telling you whether or not it believes it is. But what you really meant when you said, do you believe it is you meant, does the evidence support this assumption? Is it a safe assumption? Can you conclude that beyond a reasonable doubt? These things. And maybe we're just going to be a little bit better at, sort of lawyering up our language and just getting more clear.
mm,
Like, I didn't really mean believe. I meant, can you conclude, right? And it'll give you different answers just based on that. And
yeah,
I think that's
interesting.
really, really important. And it's also important then to build a library of prompts and understand what prompts and what kind of prompts generate certain kinds of answers, so that you can get good at identifying, this is a weak response because the prompt was weak, versus, maybe the problem is the data, right?
Next thing we know, we're gonna have AI literature and grammar taught at school.
I follow a person on the internet, on Twitter, who just released a prompt engineering book at Amazon, and I'm going to buy it. Pretty cool. So
What's
this is kind of
Twitter?
an example. This is an example of RAG, and now I want to, let's extend the cooking metaphor all morning long. Let's do what Emerald would do and kick it up a notch. Okay, so let's now take this prompt and say, okay, so I got this data back. Summit, one thing Summit does automatically here is, you see where it says blocks down below? Okay,
Mhm.
so it says raw. This is the raw response, because I told it to respond as a JSON object, and it did. Sometimes you might not say respond as a JSON object, and it'll just say, here's a bunch of information, and then put some little JSON in the answer. Summit automatically goes through and parses the response from the GPT step right here, and it breaks it down and says, here's the blocks that were inside that response. Some of it's code, which was the JSON object, and we actually give you then the code to run with that object. And then some of it was text. In this case, there wasn't any text. Some of it was links, and some of it was images. So we're doing that work of taking what the GPT gave us back and breaking it down into the structured pieces of types of data that you might want to use next, because maybe you did ask for a link, and in a no code workflow, having to extract that link as a next step is tedious, and it error, it might not work. It's nice to just have that one GPT step, obviously, just say, by the way, here are the 5 links that were in here. Here's the text that was in here. Here's the code that was in here. We, as the makers of Summit, know that people are trying to get those kind of structured insights out. And so we're pre-structuring the response for you. So that's one thing that's different here, but I want to do something a little bit even more fun. So another thing that you can do when you call AI from Summit is you can actually define what kind of output you want. So I added um, an output attribute to this object, okay, and just by putting quotes around output, and I'm going to actually put in, okay, output is another object. So what I get to do now is I'm actually going to get to describe the object I want GPT to return me, because you see in the current one, if I look down at this JSON, I said, just give me a JSON object. You, chef's choice, right? You get to choose. And it's like, okay, the pricing is essential and advanced, price per month, description, and billing, right? And it sort of decided for itself what that object was going to look like. What I'm going to do and what Summit allows you to do now is we say, no, because what if next time I call this, you decide to change it up, right? You're going to break my workflow. We're going to tame that variability here. I love the fact that it can do this, but I want to tame that. And I want to actually say, we want to get a couple attributes specifically back. And the good example would be the price per month. So I don't want price per month to be a string, $39. I want that to be a number. Okay. And that's important because maybe in my workflow, I need to treat that like a number. And if I don't get it back as a number, I'm going to have to add extra steps just to format that darn thing. Remove the $, turn it into a number. If it breaks, I get a null value. It just sort of turns into a little mini train wreck. So instead, we're going to say, let's do this. We'll do lowest price, and that's what we wanted to call this. And we're just going to put in a number that isn't, it's not in there, but we'll just say 1 because that's a small number. So what we're doing is we're actually going to feed the GPT call this structure
It's
here.
nice that you can edit it straight from within the tool.
Exactly. So within Summit, you can create these objects that define what you want the response to be. And I'll give you an example where this really comes in handy. Let's say that you have an Airtable or you have a Google Sheet or something where you want to populate a row and you
Mm-hmm.
want GPT to populate that row for you. What you want to put in here is column name, example value, column name, example value. That way, when you get a response from GPT, it's already fitting the schema, again, fancy word for the structure of that row or that object. So if you have an object in your database, an Airtable column, table, etc., or maybe you have a bunch of objects already in JSON format and you want the response to match, this is where you would put that. And this will allow us to get, okay, let's get back the lowest price and the highest price as numbers. And I could do more, but let's just see how it works. I always love live demos, so I can't guarantee how this will work, but I'm going to run it again, and we'll see what it does. So we're defining the output here, and if it doesn't work, we can give it another shot. Cool. Okay, so here's the and actually, I need to remove this. So I said, can you summarize it and return as a JSON? So I'm actually going to remove this, and instead, I'm going to remove that request to create its own JSON object there. And we'll see what it parses out. There you go. So now you can see, sorry, let me scroll here. Now you can see content, the response. I got 39 and 139 as numbers inside an object here, which is exactly what I wanted, right? And that saves me a whole bunch of steps, and it also guarantees that every time I call this, it's always going to give me, again, lowest price colon number, highest price colon number. And again, just taming that variability. I could also say things like, let's get a little bit more creative and let's get more value out of the same call. So we don't want just lowest price and highest price. I also want to say, let's say that the reason we're doing this is we want to see if this company, so in Zapier, maybe somebody signed up, it's a prospect, or in Typeform, sorry, and we have this Zapier flow, which I'll show you in a second. What we also want to know is,
I wonder if you have something that we can see how it integrates with other tools as well.
yeah,
And obviously I don't want to kind of like change your presentation
no,
here,
let's
but
do
just
that.
like for us to have a look at,
Yep.
okay, this is what it looks like. This is the problem that you might,
Yeah.
you might have, and this is
Yep.
how we're solving it.
Yeah. So let's do that. So in
I'm
this
thinking
case,
like
add a few more fields.
plain English, painful operations life,
Yeah.
somebody working at their company
Yeah.
using Zapier table or any other tool.
Yeah.
Um,
So let's
what
do
would that
that.
look like? That moment of stress.
Yeah. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to load up a type form here that I already have
Hmm.
sort of a good demo sense for. We'll say new entry. So this is just somebody. Let's say that this is a This is a free trial sign up, which I maybe wouldn't be a type form, but for illustration purposes, it's a sign up. When you get a new entry, this is the account. Let's choose the field. So I have this conference sign up. So actually, let's change this to this is an attendee, right? So somebody's coming to a conference that we're hosting, an event that we're hosting, and we want to learn we want to learn as much as we can about them just to see if they're a fit. Because
Yeah.
when somebody does this, you send a Slack, you're like, oh, we have a new attendee. What is the next thing you do? You go to their website, you try to find out as much as you can about them, and then you want to share that with your team, right? So
Or
that's
if
an
you're me,
example
you
where
go to their LinkedIn and connect with them and become their
yes,
best friends.
exactly. Yeah. So so in this case, this is a friend of mine who runs a company called Arrows, which is a HubSpot app, and so I just have a pre-filled entry here. So the company name is Arrows, and the website is arrows.to. And so what we want to do now is we want to be able to let's use that pricing model let's use that flow or that model that we have in Summit to get more information on them. So I'm going to click Models by Summit. So what this is we call this our companion app, and what the companion app does is it's inside of Zapier, also inside of HubSpot, and inside of Clay. And what these allow you to do is you can choose you can choose to get data back from any of the models that you have in your Summit account. And what makes this really fun is the model is like a drawer, it just opens up, and we can automatically. So let's find the pricing URL. That's the first thing we need to do, and let's go back and look at Summit really quick here, so you can see the specific model. So I'm going to go to all models, and the
Mm.
one that we're looking at here is. Let me delete this one here. So
And I
delete.
also want to hear from the audience. Is that something that kind of resonates with your day to day? Do you have a similar process that you're thinking of as you're watching this? I would love to hear.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
drop us a comment in the chat.
I, let's see. Make sure I'm logged in the right account still. I need to delete some of these. Make space. Okay. All right. So yeah, so this is one where I mean, a lot of times I know I want to go look at. Let's say the way we qualify them is we need to look at how does this company sell? We're selling to people who sell to enterprises. We want to know if they also sell to enterprises because that'll help us know that they're maybe a good fit. If they don't sell enterprises, maybe if they're consumer, they're not. And you need to go to their pricing page to figure that out. But on your type form, you're not going to say, "Hey, give us the URL of your pricing page," right? You're going to say, what's your domain, what's your website, that kind of thing, and then you kind of have to automate that search step. So we built a model in Summit that does that. It takes as input the name of the company and the domain, and then it does a search for where can I find information about pricing for the company called this. And another thing we've done in Summit is we built in a search function that brings back really clean responses. So we're not just scraping Google or using Google results. We actually get back really structured data, and then we can tell GPT, hey, out of all these search results, tell us what you think the pricing URL is. And so let's go back to Zapier, and we can call this, and you can see that model in Summit takes these arguments. What's the domain and name of the company? Fortunately, we have that. So this is the company website, and then the name of the company. I'll just put it in right here. And the job of this one is to get the pricing URL. And because we need that in order to do the other one, which is okay. Now that we have the pricing website, go ahead and take that screenshot and get the data. So we'll call this one first. And again, this is calling GPT in the background, and you can see arrows.to/pricing. So it figured out what its pricing page is just based on that Summit model, right? And if you're familiar with Clay, that's a tool that also allows you to do very similar things. Typically in an outbound motion, you're building this table of data and you're enriching prospects. That's very useful for outbound. What we're doing here is saying this is inbound, and I've built this enrichment feature now, and I want to use it. Maybe I want to use it in HubSpot. Maybe sometimes I'm using Zapier, or maybe I'm even changing tools and I want to use this somewhere else. The thing that's easy to overlook here is that we can call the Summit model from anywhere. So we can get a pricing URL for any company from any tool we use, whether it's HubSpot or Zapier or Make, et cetera. So that's the first thing. So we got the pricing URL back, which is handy. And now we need to go ahead and use that other one. So we're going to call Summit one more time. And we're going to call that, we're also going to get, let's get all the data from this one. And we're going to pick now the different model, the one that takes the pricing URL as an argument. And we're going to go ahead and do extract pricing data. And now this one takes the pricing URL, right? So now we can just relay this into here and we can say, pass this in.
And is this because you already trained Summit to perform these actions, or is that something that you can just use directly on Zapier and just like connect to Summit and it comes with these kind of preset actions?
Yeah. So the Summit app in Zapier, which is called Models by Summit, it
Hmm.
it automatically detects all of the models that you have in your account, and the actions and inputs that they take, they actually get loaded dynamically. So I'll delete this one. It's the same app in Zapier, but what's
Uh-huh.
neat is I can extend my functionality here by saying now the event is this is a standard list. You can either find data or find there's all different kinds of data to pull out of your model. But within my account, every user of this app in Zapier is going to have their own list of Summit models. And then every single Summit model is going to have its own unique set of parameters that it takes. And you get to decide what those are inside of Summit. So if I go into my pricing URL one, you see this input here where it says company name is a tag. And it also says company domain we call these tags. You can decide which of any of the pieces of data inside your model is a input field in Zapier. And so if I come over to the Zapier step here, you see we actually detect for you. You can call this from Zapier. When you do choose this model in Zapier, it will have the following input fields. We actually show you, what the input fields are going to be when you load it up. And so if you
A
come back
nice,
over here,
I like, I mean, a nice, that's nice. That's great documentation.
thank you. Yeah, it's it's fun because there's a lot of as you know, there's like a lot of you don't really realize you need it until you yourself are using it. You're like, how come this doesn't just tell me the answer? So we want to go
You
that
don't
extra
realize
mile,
you need it until it's too late.
and then it's such a head slap. So we built that in, and that means that now when I look at this model and I want to call it, the parameters that are in here are the ones that I chose. And so if I want to change those, I can change those. I just go back into the Summit model and republish, and those will be here. So if I also want to take in a different field or maybe remove one, totally up to you. But you only need the one app in Zapier called Models by Summit. And so then I got the pricing URL that worked. The next step is I needed to pass that into this one. So I'm going to, and I'm going to change the name of this to extract pricing info. And, there's not like a default app in Zapier that would allow you to normally figure out, hey, just go out and get me, the specific things that I'm interested in about somebody's pricing for me, right? You're always going to have to write a scraper. You're always going to have to do something. The fact that I now have this reusable module or model in Summit means that all I need to do now is give it any pricing URL on the internet, and it's going to try to extract the lowest price, the highest price, and whether or not they offer demos, And so it just
Mhm.
becomes this thing that you can reuse over and over and over again, kind of regardless of the platform, that you're using. So here I got back the data, and you can see that. So we has enterprise tier, highest price is custom. So actually, they have a custom price, but they do have an enterprise tier, and now I can actually go in here and continue. So typically, what you want to do at this point is you add a path or something, and you say, okay, now based on whether or not they offer a demo or sell to enterprise, I want to either send this to Slack, my sales team, because hey, we have this new conference attendee that's qualified. And if they're not, maybe you just add them to your email list and say they're not a fit now, but we're going to market to them. So yeah, this is a way of separating. I think the thing that it's here, but it's not being said out loud as much as we're trying to really separate there's the trigger and there's the action at the bottom. But again, it's the stuff that happens in the middle that you may want to use in many different workflows that we believe belongs somewhere else so that you can access it from anywhere. We have customers that are just calling the APIs of these models because every model also has, to use the word of the morning, API. If you're a coder or you're writing JavaScript, PHP, Ruby, Python, whatever it is, your model that you just made a couple minutes ago has its own endpoint. And so you can call this from code. We have customers that do call these models from code because they have business users that want to be able to build and edit the models, but then their developers can use the APIs to those models and pull that data directly into the product.
Mm-hmm. Jason says data transformation is definitely the meat of the process. The modules are awesome.
Nice. Thanks, Jason.
Would you
Yeah,
say like something like Summit would be more geared towards IT teams rather than operators?
I think that initially the opportunity is to build a tool where operators may not uh, we want to save them from having to do a bunch of work, like I said, in
Hmm.
transforming this data and doing extra things. I think what we are focused on being with Summit is we want to have enough developer functionality, recognizable things like API endpoints, data transformations, these sorts of things that a developer can look at it and go, I can also add value here. I can use it. I can access it. Um, I'll show you one other thing that developers, if you're working in a larger company and it matters that developers can see these things, every model
Yeah.
in Summit is also exportable and importable as a text file.
Hmm.
And it's a very short and concise text file. So this text file right here actually contains the search query, it contains the prompt that we feed the AI, it contains hidden, the OpenAI key reference and the model we're using. So the opportunity here is to say, look, if you have a developer team or you just have people that want to track changes, right? Super easy to track changes here. In fact, you can even use something like get a developer tool to say, when did, what model are we using? What prompt are we using? Hey, Claudia, change the prompt. To be able to track and go back and see, oh, that prompt got changed in this model.
Hmm.
Uh, very, very good for collaboration across IT teams and operators because operators want to make these changes and they want to have that autonomy. But developers are there to say, I have to make sure this works across the board. What did we change and when did it change? Right. So it's,
Yeah, I feel like that's the tricky part, really facilitating that communication between the operators who might want to not having to wait for the IT teams to kind of develop their solution and they want to go ahead and do it themselves, which is why we have no code and all these things.
yeah.
So
But I think that there is currently a pretty big wall and it's not see-through that's between no code
mm,
and code.
yeah.
And I think if it was a more transparent wall, I think a lot of the objections that developer and IT teams have to no code would maybe go away more. And then also a lot of the value that developers can add, which is, oh, you want to go ahead and change the model we're using in 50 of the no code flows that we have. We can actually just change the text in 50 files, re-import them to Summit, and we're done.
Hmm.
Compare that to click, click, save, click, 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 save. Oh, and I have a typo, right? That's not a good use of the operator's time in that case. That's a case where a developer ought to be able to come in and just say, yep, we did a find and replace on all of those
Hmm.
things, and it's done. And so that's where we see how can we actually get these two worlds to see through to the other side, but then also get the benefits. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thali, hi Thali. um they say your module has a log, data, and grid UI. Can you please show them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Show them.
Absolutely. So let me
Mhm.
show you where those come in. And so let me go back to the one that we already saw, and I'll just explain sort of the obvious. So we have this grid, data, and log. Okay, so uh, this may or may not be cached, but what we've done so far is we've been working with JSON data. JSON data ends up in the data part of the model output. So models, let me take a step back. The reason there are three is models have three kinds of output: a grid of data, which is the JSON object or the data response, which you can create using this canvas, and then the log, which is everything that ran. So in this example, this is extract pricing data again. This what you're seeing here is the data response. So it's the JSON that the model returns when you call its data endpoint. You can also create what we call a gridded response, which is actually not very useful in this model's case, but I'll show you an example where it is. And we also have what's called the log response. So the log, if you're used to like console log or coding, a log is really a record of all of the things that happened in this function or in this file and the order in which they happened. So the log is really nice for two things. Just kind of inspect and see, did things happen in the order I was expecting? Because I have all these arrows and things. You can see that. We have that printed out here. The other thing it's good for is timing things. So you can see what time did things execute. The ones that you end up using more often are data. I would say this is, probably 90% of the time. But the grid is where a lot of cool magic can happen if you are into math and build mathematical models. So let's talk about.
And that's it for today. See you all next week. No, I'm joking.
Bye. I can talk about math for 1 minute if we want. But yes, let me show you what that means. So I have calculations. So something that's often very difficult to do in no code is mathematics, because a lot of no code platforms aren't built with math in mind. So I can, we've changed that with Summit, where math is, we call it native support for math. So I can actually type in kind of Excel-like formulas like equals 150 times 49 times this, which is sales tax, et cetera. And I can build a mathematical model for pricing. We have people that have done real estate calculations, loan calculations, appraisals, underwriting models, a lot obviously in the financial world that involves spreadsheets. If you have a spreadsheet that you wish were an API, or if you have a spreadsheet that you wish you could call from a workflow, Summit is the answer to that. And pricing models is one that again and again, we see people build pricing models in spreadsheets. Feels like the right place at first, and it works up until a point. And then you're like, how do we generate an automated quote for someone from this? They filled out this form, but it's a complex model, or even if it's a simple model, how do we do that? So Summit has support. The grid does two things. One is it shows you results in a kind of a calculator layout like this, more like a receipt, you might say, just with one column of numbers. The other thing you can do is you can actually do, you can run numbers over time. And so if I just change this one thing here from, hey, number of units sold one time, 150 units were sold. Let's say that every month I sell 150 units. So I automatically, just by changing that one drop down, I get a monthly forecast of revenue or taxes or whatever it is right on the canvas and right inside this tool. And what I can also do is say, we're not expecting to sell 150 units every month. We're actually expecting that to grow. Summit also supports the ability to say, this is going to grow. Now this is more advanced, sort of language and how you learn to use it. But now I have that growing by 10% every month. So it'll be 150 this month, then 165, 182, and so forth. So we have an almost like Google Sheets level of power in terms of mathematics, which means that you can now take a lot of those Google Sheets that you're leaning on, where you're like, okay, we have to use this sheet, but we're using it in an automated workflow. If I call it and they call it at the same time and we overwrite each other's numbers, that's going to break. This fixes that. You can call this, we have people that call this thousands of times, and it's not going to break because it's just a function that you made. And
how many runs can you do?
So with Summit, we don't put a cap. Good transition, maybe a place to land it here. So we do pay-as-you-go pricing to start. So it's free to get started. Pay as you go. We're charging pennies per run. So we want to be competitive with like a Zapier or Make in terms of how they price. We don't have a floor, meaning it's not going to cost you $50 a month automatically or $100 a month to get started. You could just literally sign up for zero, pay a few cents, try it out. None of the work that I'm doing in the tool costs anything. That's all free. It's only once you call it from elsewhere. In terms of scale, I can say we already have customers that are doing many, many thousands of runs per day. We do tens of thousands or 100,000s of calls a month. If somebody's interested in a lot of volume, we'd love to talk to you. But our pricing is meant to be really easy to get started. And then, if you want to scale it, just talk to us. You know where to find me.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Cool. It's kind of the overview. I'd love to answer questions. This is a pretty new tool, and people are always giving me great ideas and feedback. I am also a developer on the team, so I could maybe take what you share and run with it.
Absolutely. Which is why I was kind of encouraging people to come out of their shell and just
Yeah.
tell us, is this resonating with any of your workflows? Do you see yourselves using it? Do you have any particular questions? And speaking of questions, let's officially open our Q&A.
Yeah.
Here we go. But thank you so much, Matthew. This is such a great, again, such a great tool, solid
Thanks.
foundation. And for me personally, I'm really curious to see if it's going to aid that, if it's going to break that wall. Our mission here is to break that wall. So maybe it's a matter of we get more events, we get more people educated on the right terminology, what an API is, what a webhook is. We've done that
Yeah.
in the past, but how do we really create that bridge? I think that's what is going to help tools
Yep.
like yours really get
Completely.
get used and adopted by a vast majority of people, and especially in ops. Like if I think of our audience as well, how do we help them pick up Summit and really help them with their operations?
Aligned.
Question from Jason: Can we use other models besides ChatGPT? Yes.
Yeah. So the way we've built it is to be generic. You could say model agnostic. Obviously, GPT is a very popular one. You just change the model here. If I change this to Llama 3, I believe, you can see the logo changes to Meta. I will say
Hmm.
we also have support for Hugging Face. If you're familiar with that, so you're really geeking out on the AI models. We do have a Hugging Face capability. It's a little different in terms of how they work, and there's a dedicated resource needed, et cetera. So I would say if you're interested in Llama or a model that's hosted on Hugging Face, reach out. I would love to work with you on making sure that it's as smooth to use these other models that is to use GPT.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And let us know, Jason, if you've got a follow up question. I know that Jason is very much into AI.
Yeah,
Um,
love it.
awesome. Let's see. We do have another question here. What do you think? This is more, again, AI kind of centered. Question from Paul. What do you think the long term costs will be for AI implementation? Do you think we will see more open source and local on prem AI in the future?
I think that you will see more of all of the above in the future. My guess is that it's the classic line: technology is not evenly distributed yet, right? That's the problem. And so you're always going to have people at the cutting edge building a game using NVIDIA GPUs by the by the thousands and doing something amazing. I think you have to decide where on that adoption curve you're surfing, right? Are you really about the long tail and saying, I'll give you an example. There are models on Hugging Face right now, which I know is a fun, silly name, but uh, classification. Okay, one of the things that we do as operators, and I did in that job I mentioned at the beginning of this, is put this thing into a bucket. Is this good, bad, or neutral? Right? There are models now that are really, really good at that and really, really cheap. And it would be silly to use GPT-4 on those. You just don't need to. And so to answer your question, I think we're going to end up with a more sophisticated customer base for these,
Hmm.
where more selection means better decisions about choosing the right one for the right use case, just like we do with a lot of other technologies where you go, you don't need that for this. If that's what you want to do, there's a custom model built for that. It costs fractions of that. And what that's going to do is I think it's going to end up creating more competition, which is just going to end up being better for everyone, right? It means that, there will be competition for that. And somebody might say, hey, I want the Ferrari version of a text classifier. Great. But it also means that there's going to be a Volkswagen version for for everybody that gets the job done, right?
Yeah, and I feel like we touched upon this topic in a couple events that we've had, maybe last week or the week before, and we were saying how, at least this is our community prediction. We think, and I feel like we also talked about it during our weekly hangouts on Tuesday, but we feel like there's a lot of noise right now in terms of no code AI tools, especially AI tools,
Hmm.
and it's almost as if we all need to kind of filter and really get the 4 or 5 tools that really work, and
Hmm.
for them to be optimized and their foundations to be really strong, and kind of filter out all the rest, the noise.
I will say what I think is going to happen. The market's going to decide, and
Mhm.
what I'm betting on is that builders, makers, operators, and developers, what they're going to say is, we actually the wrapper products and finished apps and everything, that's all good. That feels like iPhone apps or something else, and we need those too. But I think what's going to really be incredible is people want to use these things for themselves. I think when companies try to build a thing which uses it for you, it's like, oh, you don't need to use the AI. We're just going to use it for you. They're putting that wall back up, right? And they're sort of making it harder for you to get your hands dirty and use the thing and get the most value out of it. So what we're trying to do here with Summit is say, we want to get you as close to the metal, as they say, or as close to the LLM as possible, but maybe without having to deal with some of the annoying things or uncertainties around it, which we know doesn't create value for you. It doesn't create value for you to have to deal with that variable response. You
Mhm.
need stability. But it does create value for you to be able to write your own prompt and change it, or add caching or add retries. Like, those are all value creating things. So we want to get people as close to the AI as possible, and add just a thin layer of value.
Yeah, which ties really well with this next question that we have from Matteo.
Yeah.
And he says, how can we improve our prompting skills as no code operators?
Mm. Uh, there is. So what I would recommend is, first of all, you need to, I'm in GPT or Perplexity. Both, I subscribe to both premium versions, $20 a month each, all the time, every day, asking questions. But then, how do you improve? You improve by doing something, observing the results, and then trying it again. Right? You have to be a little more scientific with how you use these things. So don't. I'll give you one really easy takeaway. Don't ask once. Right? Learn to ask the same question twice in different ways. Ask the same question to two different LLMs and see what different responses you get. Like, become more of a scientist in how you use these tools, almost like you're studying their behavior, because you are. And that is actually how you end up learning how to get the result you want. You're like, oh, when I asked it this way, I got this. When I asked it that way, I got that. You're learning, right? Because you're being just observant. And I think if you're in a transactional mindset where you're like, I'm here to get an answer and then move on with my life, that doesn't create enough margin for you to learn, right? So you need to just have it open all the time and just use it for stupid reasons. And you're still going to learn how to write better prompts, even just by asking it anything that comes to mind, right? The more you do it and the more you are sort of aware of what you're doing, I think the better you can get. And then there's obviously books and blogs and things you can read. There's a new book called Prompt Engineering, that just came out on Amazon. It was released this week. I'm sure it's great. Probably a little heady in that sense, but
Mm.
definitely a skill. So yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I get frustrated and I just take a break because I try and ask and interact, as you were saying, ask my same question in a different way multiple times, and I still don't get the outcome that I'm thinking. And so
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I think we're not working today. I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah, and you learned something there too. You learned about, I must be at the edges of this model for some reason. It's sort of like bumping up against the wall in a video game and going, okay, there's a wall here. Like,
Yeah, and I feel it's mutual because then I get a message that says you've reached your limit. It's like, how?
we're done with you today. Okay, we're cutting you off. Um,
um,
so yeah, the prompt, is this prompt scientist here asking a
oh
question?
yes, let me see. We got a question here. Yeah, it's Dali, prompt scientist. Fitting name for this episode today.
Yeah.
What languages can you use in Summit? Can I build my workflow in Mermaid, etc.?
Hmm. So I'm going to confess that after 20 years as a developer, I haven't
What
heard
is
of Mermaid.
Mermaid?
Uh, oh, it's a JavaScript based tool. Okay. I'll answer this. I'm not familiar with Mermaid, so I would be doing it a disservice to speak to it exactly. Um, However, Taylor is in the name of the author, by the way, of that book. I forget,
Mm.
Taylor Lees, is that right? Okay. You can run inside of Summit. We have a code block for Python, Ruby, PHP, JavaScript, and TypeScript. So you can write code blocks here. In Python, there's support for requests, NumPy, and Pillow, which does image manipulation. Still just JPEGs, though. So we have more libraries coming that can be used inside these code blocks. This is experimental still, though, the code blocks here. Now, this is all sort of code inside Summit. In terms of externally, again, every model that you build in Summit, it has its own API. So literally anything that allows you to call an API and process the response, you're welcome to call this from. So I'm not, it's always, there's interesting things that I've learned about a lot of these workflow builder tools. Some of them are just like call a webhook and send a, post a request, and then you're not going to do anything with the response. On our homepage, you'll see we list out Zapier, Make, Customer IO, Glide, and others. Why? Because those are the tools that let you both call an API and then use the response and do something with it. So that's the key. As long as you can use the response, obviously you can use this from anywhere. And then we have, limited code functionality support inside the Summit product itself.
Awesome. How are we doing with time? We still got a couple of minutes left. So I'm loving your interaction, guys. Jonathan, Jason, Thali, really love your questions. Thank you so much. I usually just prioritize people that watch live, but we also have a ton of questions here from our forum. And so one of those would be from Sam. What's your view on using AI in creating and managing documentation systems?
Oh, to be honest, I don't have much of one at the moment that I haven't already said. Like documentation systems, to me, you have a real human user. I would say that that's where you really need to track changes and what difference does it make. Like in that case, let me put it this way. How do you make sure that you don't regress in terms of the quality, right? So humans are very involved in writing great documentation. We're great technical documentation writers, or just documentation writers in general. They have to be succinct. They have to be concise. They have a certain way of speaking. They understand the lingo of a audience. You could easily lose that with AI. And so I think the question becomes like, where does the human fit into the loop? And then how do you make sure that you don't lose the human created value, which is the most expensive part and the non-scalable part, each time you change something about your AI? So if there's no human in the loop, I'm not even sure it would be the best. I think AI is going to create a lot of mediocre content. It's already doing that.
Yeah.
The best stuff is going to have a human that knows its audience really well. At least that's what I currently believe. But I mean, I'm an optimist in terms of I also think there's just a lot that's not documented. I'll give you one example. I have a friend who's written a tool. It's an AI wrapper, but it's great. You pass it any Loom URL or YouTube URL, and it turns the content, the transcript, into a how-to guide. So it just breaks it down
I
step
need
by
that.
step. And instead of just saying the words out loud, it just automatically writes it out for you. And I've used that to do documentation already. And the beauty of it was he put me in the loop though, right? It's Playbook Writer. Playbook Writer allows you then to look at says, oh, we did this thing. And now here's some suggestions to make it better. I'm still working, I'm still editing, but it took the 0 to 1 off my plate. And I think that's the beauty of it, right? So there's my solicited feedback for what it's worth.
I love that. And actually, maybe you can share that link with me in the community as well. I would love to see for, our videos. And unless you're using SAM, unless you want to document your automations and processes, then in which case you can also use Operator, our platform from NoCodeOps, which right now helps you do all that. So I've posted a link in the chat. And unless we have any other questions that I'm not seeing here, and I know we're at time because we do have a bunch more in our form, and maybe Matt, I'll just send them to you.
Sure.
I shared your LinkedIn, so people, I highly encourage you to go ahead and connect with Matt. As you can see, he's a lovely human being. You can also find him in our NoCodeOps community. I'm adding Summit to our NoCode stack. So you're going to find a Summit thread for you to ask any questions about the tool. And very happy, to create this sort of partnership / collaboration, but just like having you here with us, teaching the community, it's always a pleasure and an honor. So
It's all mine. So thank you very much, and thank you to the audience for the interactivity and questions. It's great. Please let me know what you think.
absolutely. And speaking of the community, if you are part of our NoCodeOps community, check your emails. It was my 2nd-year anniversary last week, 2 weeks ago. So we've grown from zero to hero with this community, and we just sent out a survey to kind of collect data on, community sentiment. Yeah, I've been eating my popcorn, looking at the first couple of results. But do go ahead, fill in. It's a 1-minute, super quick survey, and we're gonna pick a lucky winner to send out some lovely NoCodeOps swag. So, who doesn't love swag? And with that being said, Matthew, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Once more. I will see you in our Discord, and I wish you a very great day ahead.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Take care. Take care.